Welcome to the Circular Firing Squad. I'm Marty, a counseling faculty at Kent State University and a host for Circular Firing Squad. We've got 4 members tonight, 4 questions, and 4 answers to each question. Each squad member generates a question, and then we all have to answer it, ranging from the academic to the abysmal. Let's see who's with us tonight.
Hi, everyone. Elliott Ingersoll, professor of counseling at Cleveland State University, the one in Ohio, and host of Apply Topically.
Eric Perry. I am a faculty and program director at Divine Mercy University and co-host of the Tech Savvy Professor.
Hi, I'm Steph Martyr, a doctoral candidate and practicing clinical counselor.
So we've got a little smaller crew today, which is okay. It'll be a nice size show, a right-sized show, I think, considering we've got some questions about higher ed and everything's right-sizing in higher ed. But Elliott, you've got the first question, which is not a academic question.
Depends on what you studied, but yeah. What is a fun or memorable Halloween from, your youth or your young adulthood? Any point in your life is fine. I was thinking of one from my youth, but whatever. A fun, memorable Halloween.
Yes, I think I'm up first for this one. I don't know. I think about... It's not going to be a surprise to anyone who can see my background right now. I had the same Halloween costume, but for 3 or 4 years until the pants were about mid-calf and I couldn't wear it anymore. It was a NASA astronaut costume I had for years, and it was my favorite thing. I wore it so much that the year I didn't, folks asked where it was. So I was obsessed with it. But I love that costume. My grandmother had it. I actually still have it in my closet. I kept it. My grandmother kept it for years and then gave it to me, and it's kind of just hanging there. And then we got a picture with my son wearing it when he was about the same age. So just something really cool, I think, to be able to see him do too. So yeah, I mean, that's one thing that sticks out for me.
I don't remember. It was my early 20s, but at this point in my life, that is my youth. I was in New England at the time, and there's a place there. I don't know if it still exists. I couldn't get a clear answer from a group when I put it out there, but behind Foxborough Stadium, what was called a Halloween theme park called Spooky World. And right, it sounds cheesy, and it was, but it was also amazing. So my friends and I decided to go one year. And oh my gosh, while I'm telling the story, I'm also remembering I'm ignoring all the Halloweens in Salem, Massachusetts. Okay, anyway, we're going to continue with Spooky World. But what was cool was that they had, autographs. And it included the guy who wrote Monster Mash, one really tall guy who played a villain somewhere, and Elvira. And Elvira, it was so cool to meet Elvira, and I have her autograph, and that was really, really cool. I don't like haunted houses, so this for me was awesome. We also went on some sketchy, carnival rides, just like the swings and stuff, but since it's like a movable thing, that's pretty spooky too. But that was a really fun Halloween.
So Bobby Pickett was at this Halloween. Did he do Monster Mash, or did he was just there?
He was there for autographs, but he looked at, we all went and got his autograph, especially because he didn't have a big line, and we wanted to help him. Our hearts went to him, and also it's pretty cool. So yes, I have his autograph.
And then Cassandra Peterson.
Mm-hmm, correct.
Long line for Cassandra Peterson?
Much longer.
Was she in full Elvira garb?
Oh, yes. And, this, even 20 years ago, I was like, you look, she's probably still looks exactly the same. But she was immaculate. It was amazing. I was in awe. When I first saw this question, I thought, okay, childhood Halloween experiences. The only thing I can describe is I lived in Chicago, and we would trick or treat a couple of blocks over, where they had these huge 3.5-story walk-up apartments, and each floor had 4 apartments on it. So you would go in and you would just take your hand and slam against all the buttons
and one of them would buzz and let you in. And then basically you would be doing stairs up and down as people open their doors, and you would collect your candy that way. Interesting memory. I remember that experience. I don't know if it was my favorite Halloween. Halloween was never my holiday. I can tell you one Halloween I had when I was an undergraduate in college. I got a kimono and I decided I would wear a kimono. Then figured I had to do something that was a little bizarre with it. So I also got myself like a saber that I wrapped around my waist and decided I was going to be punk samurai. So then it was a matter of like coloring my hair and taking not a clip, a safety pin, and putting it through my nose. I mean, that was the piercing that I self-inflicted on myself. And then decided, I was going to go on this date with this woman who was co-ed, who was very nice. And her Halloween costume was, I said, "What are you dressed as?" And she said, "I'm tripping." And I said, "Yeah, no, I mean, that's your costume? I'm tripping?" She goes, "No, I'm tripping." And her costume consisted of like a farmer's hat where she had made little stars and things hanging from it. She had rainbows painted on her cheeks. And she was on LSD for the whole evening. And we went from party to party. Me as samurai, as a punk samurai, and her as tripping. My most probably best experience in Halloween. And that's not to say that the benchmark was really low in that, but it was kind of fun. Pick up your date, and she is both in a costume called tripping and tripping at the same time.
I gotta tell you, I paid money, like actual cash money, for those pictures. Just not even to share them, just for my own amusement.
Yeah.
Those are good stories. Halloween is one of my favorite holidays, is my favorite. I love it. Love haunted houses, love all that stuff. And this one was kind of accidental. It was the Saturday before Halloween, and my friends and I had driven to see Maynard Ferguson at Packard Music Hall. And great concert. And then on the way home, we had a friend. He was always the designated driver because he had epilepsy and like he couldn't drink or anything. So he was always safe to drive. He went the wrong way, and we ended up at Hiram College. And I was probably 18. My friends were 17. They were having student organizations for the best haunted house on Hiram campus. And so we just went around. Everywhere we went, people are giving us beer, and we went through these haunted houses, and it was just the most fun, unexpected party. Because those sometimes they just crop up and you're invited in, and that was definitely one of the more memorable ones.
Yeah, I went to one where someone had taken large computer printing sheets, when it used to be those large dot matrix printers, and basically covered the walls of their living room and said, "This is the room you can go in and you can paint." And people just kind of wrote stuff on the paper, and they had finger painting and things like that was going on the walls. There is a house, Elliott, in our area that has about 12 full size, and they look, I mean, they're really good replicas of skeletons. And he has 12 of them on his lawn or her lawn in all sorts of different positions, like one, and then pumpkins throughout. And one is sitting on a pumpkin. Another one is like posed like a soccer player ready to kick a pumpkin. It is the most creative and funny thing that I've seen. And I have to drive by and take some pictures and share it with you. It's over on Graham Road, over in Stowe, and it's funny. It's really funny and very creative. And the guy or gal has gone to a great deal of work to get these things positioned and propped up in particular ways. And like I said, they're full-size human skeletons, not necessarily from humans, but you get what I mean.
Have you seen the skeleton at the urinal up by Stanton?
No.
Someone mounted a urinal on a tree, and there's a skeleton standing there with one hand on the tree. You got to drive up past Stanton. It'll look to your left. You'll see it.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I'm close to Stanton. I'll probably walk over. Eric, take us to the next question.
Yeah, I mean, a little more serious. So what needs to be done in higher education to care for faculty and students better? Specifically, where is academic leadership missing the mark for faculty and students?
I don't like being first for this because this was a later add, and this is a thinker for me because I don't know if I'm even really as connected, and this might go to a different question later in the discussion. But I think in some ways, maybe it's about continuing to cultivate relationships. I don't know because I don't know if I don't have a problem with not being as connected. I kind of accept this is the part where you're not as connected in the process. And I think maybe recognize as I'm thinking about this, I went to a conference maybe about a month ago, and it was the best experience I had at a conference ever. And it was in a field that was not, it was in a methodology conference. And as I'm thinking about that, maybe there's something about including students more, building the community more in some sort of way where really gets inclusive and you don't feel like you're falling through when you're a brand new student entering the world. I don't know. There was something about this Q methodology conference, which was an international conference. And there just seemed to be more of an actual interest, a genuine desire to connect and build those relationships. And maybe if faculty weren't so run ragged all the time, they would have some space to be able to do that a little bit more. I don't know. I'm sure there's lots of reasons why not, but in that comparison, maybe that's my answer.
This is a tough time in higher ed all around. We've got decreasing kids going to college because there's decreasing kids. And to that degree, we have overcapacities in colleges. And so there's less enrollment. There's less state support, which has been going on for years, particularly in Ohio. Just so much the legislature has done to peel away support and at the same time put up a whole mess of new demands on us. So it's like we're constantly being asked for data. And that's the system that we work under. I think my response to your question, I don't think administration understands the capacity of the people that work for them because it's more and more and more and more. You just keep getting more with less resources and less, like you can't even afford a assistant within your department to work on some of the stuff that you could pawn off to them. The capacity keeps getting bigger, or they assume you have unlimited capacity as an employee. And frankly, it's causing worse than burnout. It's causing a lot of morale and mental health issues with folks. So that's what I don't think academic leadership gets. And they never want to talk about it. It's like the elephant in the room that they never want to bring up and say, yeah, we know you're overworked. You were hired here to teach 3 courses, do some research, and now we have you doing all this other stuff on top of it and try to sustain grants. There's just limited capacities that human beings can handle. So I think that's where they're missing the mark. And how they can do that better, I don't know. Given the current financial situation that I think most all universities are in. Okay, I can breathe again.
I agree with everything you said, Marty. Yeah, the constantly reminds me of the George Voinovich years, more with less. Here's my problem. I'm afraid administrators, by and large, aren't the sharpest tools in the shed. These were not people who were firecrackers in the classroom. I can tell you that for the most part. So I think we've got mediocre people who go into administration. That's the first weakness. But the biggest overall weakness is the whole bureaucracy of higher ed. Totally dysfunctional. You think the military's hurry up and wait? Holy socks, man. Higher ed we bring in more money than any graduate program in this new fruitcake college we're in. We can't get our replacements for the people who retire. And when you ask them, well, we need to get a search going. Oh, well, we're waiting for Big Benny to tell us yes or no. Big Benny's waiting for Big Brother to tell him yes or no. Big Brother's waiting for Big Sister. And I'm like, what are you all in 8th grade? We got to go right in and start talking about it. And they won't, because I think these are basically insecure people who have risen above what they're capable of handling. And so they're covering their rear ends the whole time. If they would just recognize the whole system is dysfunctional and we need to reorganize it, then maybe we would have some common ground. But yeah, it's like America. There's two Americas, at least. There's at least two higher education. The people in administration, they are partying their butts off. They're having a great old time with their 6, 7 figure salaries. And the turnover, if the turnover is amazing in administration, yeah, I don't have a lot of respect for the people in those positions right now, because they won't talk, they won't confront something head on. And I'm told I'm not a team player. It's like, well, if being on the team is shutting up and sitting down, yeah, you're right, I'm not. So I think that's a big part of it, but the structure itself is dysfunctional. We have got to make it more streamlined, more flexible, more able to respond to needs in the community, needs in the stakeholders. We create certificate programs just because that's the only thing you can create quickly. You can't create a degree program quickly. That's years. A certificate program you can put together overnight and it brings in money, but they'll never say that, of course. They'll say, oh, yeah, just keep doing more of that, as Marty said. So yeah, I have a lot of aggravation just with the structure itself and the types of people drawn to the upper administration positions.
Yeah, and I mean, I think there's a lot of themes here that I could probably walk with. I don't know. I get a sense for, at some institutions, there's a want to hear you, but not a want to listen and understand. So there's these kind of, give us feedback. Thanks for the feedback. And then give us more feedback and thanks for the feedback. And there's kind of this recursive loop that happens. And I think we're not paying enough attention to, what faculty workloads look like and their relationships with students. How do you give them the opportunity to do that? I think we're not paying attention to how long things take to actually come to fruition and happen when there's needs. And Marty, you mentioned this earlier. There's restrictions now around how big something can get. There's just so many students that you have to pull from, and the pool just isn't as big as it was. And I think when undergrad's your feeder and you're working in graduate education, it can create a lot of strain. I think there needs to be a more streamlined process. Asking for a position or even looking at your budget. There are some pretty creative things I've seen in higher ed around what budgets look like. Budgets are pretty standard documents. How much do you bring in? How much do you spend? How much do you have left over? But it's become more than that, because programs who are not doing well are subsidized by programs who are. You're sharing in that cost, and it becomes this kind of complex mess. I had to learn what EBITDA meant in the course of my work, and I had no interest in knowing that. Profitability goals for nonprofit institutions. Some of these things just seem like they're getting in the way of doing what it is the institution is set out to do, and that's supplying education. And I think to do that, they really have to focus more on how do they care for the faculty they have, and then in turn, how do they care for students? Those places where things are missing, those services and supports harm the students. It harms the educational experience, and then gets put back on the faculty. I think it's something we just need to be more attentive to. Well, leadership, particularly higher level leadership, needs to be attentive to. And I just don't know that they always have the visibility for that or the want to see that.
And I'll add, university president, if $200,000 a year isn't enough for you, go into business. Give me a break. These packages are ridiculous. We have 2 ex-presidents we're still paying, and they haven't done anything. One only had 2 ideas, and they were both horrible. I mean, it's unbelievable. We're still paying for that. Little vowel movement from Elliott.
Sorry, it made me think of an institution not too far from me over across the state line who spent a sizable amount on a public figure for their president, who's, I think, created more chaos than calm.
Yeah. Not my institution. I've got to tell you that, but I know which one you're talking about.
I'd like to. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to
No.
stop the commiseration. just because I'm like here, but because it looks like there was an audible. I just wanted to say, so saving it for later, that really what needs to be done, I don't know, is taking care of all of that stuff, because from where I'm sitting right now, I have no desire to get involved. So I started, and it chases away people too, who might have thought this was a good idea 10 years ago. So with all the changes that are there, it just doesn't make it even appealing. Like, why would I want to do what you're doing right now? Why would I want to enter that right now? I don't even, and start at the bottom. I'm not sure that doesn't sound great. Okay.
And Steph, I'll say this. I appreciate the comment because I've had some really talented colleagues, friends, awesome counselor educators who've just walked away. I mean, they went back into practice because they're frustrated, and this isn't what they signed up for.
Oh, my turn now. Okay. Um, we're gonna pivot, and I'm gonna ask, with streaming and everything, especially if you have premium most of the time, do you ever miss commercials?
I don't know why I would miss a commercial. I'll tell you, I mean, streaming does say if you're going to watch commercials, you get a cheaper, and a lot of streaming services say the cost of having to watch commercials is to us is you get a cheaper rate. To you, you get this stuff that interrupts your process. So I mean, I don't watch a lot of television, but there are some shows that are streamed and they break for commercials. MLB baseball games break for commercials between innings, so I'm forced to see Wegovy commercials constantly all summer long. And then other commercials that it's like when MLB season starts, after about 2 weeks, I pretty much figure out all the commercials they're going to be subjected to through the whole season because it's the same batch that's run over and over again. Of course, with those little moment of zens that they do on YouTube to kind of space out the commercial side of the station that's running whatever game is running. So I don't miss it. I pay premium for YouTube. I think what's really frustrating is when I go to the university and there's a YouTube video that I want to show, I have to sign into my account if I don't want commercials, and I have to go through two-factor authentication, which is a pain in the butt on these computers that are in the classroom. And once I'm signed in, then I have to be conscious about signing out when I leave the classroom. So yeah, I do pay for commercial free wherever I can get it. I have gone away from most traditional streaming services and are doing things like Apple TV Plus, which has some remarkable shows on it. You've got a commercial at the beginning, a bumper, you've got a commercial at the end, but the content is solid through. So you can watch the whole show or the whole episode or the whole movie without disruption. So I don't miss commercials at all, but there are about 4 or 5 I know all of the words to because they keep getting thrown at me.
I'm with you, Marty. I do not miss commercials. But yeah, with baseball, I mean, I like Shohei Ohtani's New Balance commercial. I must have seen that 100 times, right? I like the soundtrack of it. It's kind of cool. It's like I'll put the volume back up for that one. Yeah, even like trying to get news anymore. Trying to watch the World Series. Oh my gosh, we got 2 kids at university. We're not paying a lot of extra for television, but it's just like, where can you watch the World Series? I finally figured out how to do it on my telephone, but I'm like, it's the World Series. Really? Why do you make it so hard? And the places on the streaming that would offer it, they wanted you to pay like $60 for the first month. I'm like, just such a ripoff. And that some of that was with commercials to boot. So yeah, I don't miss them. And like when I try to get news, I tried to have a newspaper delivered to the house on Sundays. It got there 1 out of maybe 8 Sundays. And then all the time, you're just making sure you're not getting charged for a newspaper you never got. I was a paper boy for like 11 years. It's not that hard. You match the address up. That's the right address. You drop the paper at the end of the drive. You don't even have to get out on the porch anymore. But so I'd go to the phone to get my news, and then commercials are popping constantly. I don't know what's the story and what's the commercial. So I kind of just gave up on news because it all bleeds one thing into another. I don't even know what's real anymore. Except the Dodgers. The Dodgers are real this year. I'll tell you that for nothing. Looking good.
Not a Dodgers fan. not a Yankees fan. So I hope they both lose.
I don't know if we can do that.
How would that work?
But that would be great. Yeah. I don't know. Humans are weird. And I are one. So I don't miss commercials per se, but I miss what watching TV was like before streaming in some ways, because I think sometimes it was like the natural break where you got up and went to get something to drink or whatever. You talked if you were watching a show together or something. I feel like now it's usually the phone that creeps up when there's no commercial break after a while and you're checking something or the plot gets slow. There just aren't the natural breaks anymore. I mean, we'll pause if we feel like we need to do something, but I don't know, the experience is different. I think watching things is different. So, like, I have some of those memories, and then, like, waiting for when a show comes on at a particular time. There was something exciting about that, being there at that time it was going to be on, and, it's odd. It's weird. The on-demand thing is fantastic, but I find myself missing those more kind of nostalgic things about watching particular shows. There were some commercials that I remember, and I've looked them up from time to time, and sometimes they're not as funny as I remember, or couldn't figure out why I thought they were funny in the first place or entertaining. And then there's those
Like
that, well, I'm thinking about. There was one, it was a Chuck E. Cheese commercial or something that was just real. I don't know, it was weird. It was supposed to be funny. And like now as an adult really isn't funny. It's just stuff like that. But you'll catch them on a reel on TikTok or something like that every once in a while. And either they'll crack me up or I'll have a totally different reaction to them. I guess there's some things I miss, but definitely not. Now I feel like it's every medication under the sun is the majority of what I see.
Yeah, I think my answer kind of goes along your lines, Eric, where if I was thinking about all the commercials now, I mean, yeah, I think it started with Marty's answer. It's all medications and just letters seemingly thrown together to make up new names for medications. Maybe I don't miss, because when I was younger, I was like, oh, I hate commercials. I wish we could just watch the whole thing, right? And we have everything we wished for when we were younger, as far as I want to watch any show I want to watch when I want to watch it. I wish I could watch nothing but this all day long. And at the same time, I do miss maybe the bonding from everybody knowing a commercial, but because it was clever, okay? Not just because it annoys the hell out of you, but or because it was stupid but funny, like the International Coffee, and everybody like Jean-Luc, and they'd be like ha 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 ha, and just
Grey Poupon, right?
Yeah,
That's another one.
Part of
The Grey
me.
Poupon or the
Do you have any
Budweiser,
There's
right?
nothing really like that anymore. There's no more pop culture commercial really that I can, that's what's kind of gone. That's what I miss. I miss that on a social level, I suppose. So yeah, I miss the art of the commercial in those ways, and how we all kind of came together and could recognize certain either jingles or characters or taglines. And it was a pretty universal thing.
Okay, so I did call an audible because my question was so related to the one that Eric put up in terms of what needs to happen in higher education, and we went down into that dark, dangerous abyss. And I kind of wanted to avoid going back down it again. This is still a little dark and dangerous. I don't think it's dangerous, it's just a little dark. With mental health issues on the rise among students, what role do you believe faculty should play in supporting student well-being, and what boundaries are important to maintain?
That's a good audible. Yeah, I see a lot more anxiety and depression stuff in students than I used to. And this isn't me diagnosing. This is them coming up and telling me this is what I'm dealing with. And I'm like, okay. And I think, first of all, talking about as a person training to be a healer of a sort, we have to take care of ourselves and encouraging that, and making sure that I have lots of referrals, places other than the university counseling center, which has always got a line, places where they can go and talk to people. It's concerning though, because sometimes I feel like their exposure to media, they get the ills of the world heaped on them, but no time to discern really, what does that mean to me personally? What's in my sphere of influence, to address? And that's another thing we talk a lot about, one's sphere of influence. When we were doing, Chris Faber and I and Eugene O'Brien had a book on counseling and spirituality, and we had a whole thing on, normal guilt and unhealthy like guilt. And unhealthy guilt is when you're guilty about stuff you can't do anything about. You can't affect it, but healthy guilt is you've transgressed some moral line in your own moral compass, and you can do something about it. So the things that they talk about, I'm always trying to help them steer into where their sphere of influence is, and making sure that they have access to people who can do therapy with them, which I cannot do as a professor or as an advisor, but I can certainly point them in the right direction.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of share a lot of those thoughts, Elliot, and that, I take a pretty hard line in letting them know that I can't be that person for you. That doesn't mean I can't be helpful or supportive, that there's things that I can do. I think universities need to have appropriate resources. And one of the things that I've harped on in my work in online counselor education is that the services provided to online students need to mirror those provided to students on ground. So we need to make sure that there's resources available to them, that we provide those resources, and then we consider what accommodations look like. There's a formal process for that, but that doesn't change anything about how I can help. There's things that I can do as a faculty member to assist. And sometimes that's just having a conversation, taking time to walk through what the course requirements, assignments are, trying to be flexible with due dates and things if they really are going through something. If there's a pet peeve I have for educators, it's the kind of kiss my ring mindset, which you still see from time to time in folks, that there's a need to be professional and timely in what you do. And there's also a need for compassion and understanding. So, I think as educators, we have the ability to be that supportive influence. I think where I draw the line is, just letting them know. And sometimes it comes from a good place. Students feel connected, they feel attached, they feel supported, and they want you to be that person for them. And you can't. So I think just explaining that in a way that's kind and finding them the help and resources they need is where we can, I think, do our best work as educators.
Yep, my answer was compile a list of resources, and even thinking just attach it to the syllabus. Also stress it. I mean, for me, it's part of my personal philosophy as well. And if I were, in that role, I would like to take a little bit of extra time. And by extra time, I mean a minute and a half, perhaps, to go over the importance of students also managing mental health and how that plays a part in academia and their success as a student, and to understand themselves a little bit. And that 1 hour that they would spend or whatever it is not going to make or break them as a student. If anything, it'll help. They are not going to fail out of school because they spend an hour, going to an appointment once a week, once every other week. But maybe I'll do that more as a counselor. But nonetheless, giving the resources, saying it's good to pay attention to that if you feel the need, and I go on from there. And if they had any questions, like you were saying, to be able to point them in the direction of whoever you think or whatever you think can help them meet those goals.
This is a tough question for me, and my answers probably would have changed or have changed now being current program coordinator. Luckily, one of the things that they did is with this role was they peeled away the evaluative process. So we have a committee that kind of addresses issues when they come up in terms of mental health for students, a subcommittee then. So I'm brought into that when decisions are made about retention. But occasionally the difficulty with the support and with the rise in mental health issues is occasionally we run into folks whose mental health issues are really getting in the way of them progressing and becoming a practicing counselor. Now that means in these days, you're going to burst somebody's dream. But we also have a responsibility to protect our clients or their future clients. So it's tough. a lot of times we see students who have conditions but have not bothered to get established for accommodations, but they want accommodations, which puts us in a difficult because we can't give them accommodations if they haven't been evaluated for that purpose. And the range of accommodations that students want go beyond what is generally even suggested once they're evaluated that they need. So, as hard as it is, sometimes we just have to take an academic focus and say, this is the reality of what's expected in the course, what's expected in the program. And you have these accommodations or you don't have these accommodations, but this is what we can do and what we can't do. And that's the kind of rules that we have to live by. Also, just the idea that the necessity for people to look at their progress and look at their ability and make a self-determination that maybe this is not where I need to wind up. There's less and less of that. And for a lot of reasons, I think, because a college career is an expensive experience, and you don't want to say, I just spent a couple of years at least until somebody told me I can't do this, or I told myself I can't do this, and I'm going to switch majors or I'm going to switch degrees. And with graduate degrees, it's even particularly more difficult for people to want to make those shifts. So expense is one, and I think basically stubbornness and the idea that that we have learned in a lot of ways generationally that you can do anything with no exceptions. And that's not often the case. There's a lot of things that I can't do that I've accepted I will never do. But I made a choice to stay away from those kinds of professions as options in my selection. Maintaining boundaries and keeping it on a performance-based level, at the same time providing what resources. And when we do remediation letters, we give them steps of things they need to do. But there's no guarantee that if it's done, that they're going to suddenly become a counselor who listens, a counselor who's empathic, and a counselor who doesn't just give advice. All right, so that was the second sermon for today from me, I guess. I'm going to go with a final shot question. I think this came from Elliott. What would you pick if you were going to a costume party as your favorite DSM ICD diagnosis?
I would stay true to form and go with oppositional defiant disorder.
Yeah, I'm going to go with IED or DMDD, specifically as anger from inside out. And a little shout out for Lois Black.
We're just watching the second one in our house. But especially if I don't want to talk to anybody, I'll go with social anxiety disorder.
Oh, wow. I would go as polymorphous perversity. Look it up, folks, if you don't know what it is. But I don't do costume parties, so it would be social anxiety. I just wouldn't show up, or I'd be outside hiding behind a tree. That would be my costume. I actually have a button that says, "This is my costume." And when I'm forced to be in costume situations, I just wear regular street clothes and put that button on. I know it's Halloween. It's the season of costumes and people get into it. It's Elliott's favorite favorite celebration.
Well, I used to be a practicing pagan too. You got Samhain, that's a major festival in the pagan calendar, and the New Year. I still mark the New Year at Halloween as well.
Yeah, well, it's the season of getting our blood sugars elevated. That's basically, and going to the store starting in like late September and buying bags of candy for Halloween that don't even make it into October.
I was going to say I have about 20 of the 95-piece bag I bought. Nobody's shared it with me.
Oh my gosh, we had like at least 200 trick-or-treaters here, which is good for my weight management goals, because boy, if there was Milky Way left over, I'd certainly be diving into that. So I thank you to all of the kids and families who came by the door today.
And that was just 2 hours ago in Kent. It was Halloween. Yes.
Milky Way, and we used to be friends. Right? No.
I don't even know when we're trick-or-treating. I better figure that out.
I have a third big drawer down here to the left, where the rest of the drawers are filled with cables. And what's in this drawer is a bag of Milk Duds.
Oh. I don't know which is worse.
Yeah, I know. Milky Ways or Milk Duds.
Reese's all the way for me. Anything.
Okay.
Ooh, there's more in here than I thought. I didn't eat as many. Maybe there's
Enough is
35.
enough. Enough is enough. Thanks to the firing squad, Stephanie, Eric, and Elliott, for joining us tonight. Look for some of these characters on their podcasts on thepodtalk.net. You can find out more about them at circularfiringsquad.net. Check out and make sure to look at the Tech Savvy Professor, hosted by Eric and myself, and Vision Profiles, a podcast about the Apple Vision Pro. Our theme music is from Menage a Quad, Real Swing Chef. That's it for this episode of Circular Firing Squad. Ready? Fire.